My family and I were dining at an upscale restaurant when my husband, Eric, decided to take charge of the reservation I had made for my dad's birthday. To my surprise, he brought along his own parents and then made a comment that stung. A single father like yours doesn't belong in fancy restaurants. He should stick to cheap pubs. Although I was upset, I chose to respond calmly. You do realize this restaurant is owned by my brother, right? I said. I'm Elizabeth, a 27-year-old office worker. My parents divorced when I was young, and my dad raised me on his own. They split because my dad was always working, and it took a toll on my mom. Even though Dad still loved her and didn't want the divorce, he eventually agreed when she said, "I'm tired of waiting, set me free." After the divorce, I stayed with Dad for financial reasons. He would always tell me, "It's not your mom's fault. It's mine for relying on her too much and neglecting her. I regret making her feel lonely." Whenever I asked why Mom left, he would just sigh sadly. Despite everything, Dad always put me first. He attended all my school events and never missed a birthday or Christmas. Some people make hurtful remarks about us being a single-parent household, but Dad's love made those comments easy to ignore. After the divorce, I occasionally saw my mom, but our relationship grew distant, especially after she remarried and had another child. Once I started working, Dad retired early to enjoy a quieter life. He had worked so hard to support me, and I wanted him to finally focus on his own interests. Although I live on my own now, I visit Dad frequently. 2 years ago, I married Eric, who had been introduced to me by a friend. Eric is hardworking and honest, and my dad quickly grew fond of him. His parents were also welcoming and accepted me immediately. However, the idea of moving into Eric's family home caused me significant distress, especially considering both my parents. My parents are getting older, and I constantly worry about them. They're both retired now and have become increasingly isolated, rarely going out or interacting with others. Moving in together seemed like a good opportunity for everyone, and Eric pleaded with me to consider it. "Please, think about it," he said earnestly. Of course, I wanted to respond to his heartfelt request, but moving into his parents' house would put a considerable distance between me and my dad, making it difficult to check on him as often as I used to. Although Dad is in good health, I feared that if something happened, he might not be found in time. I was torn about what to do, but eventually, Dad offered his advice. "I'm healthy enough to live on my own. I don't want to be a burden to you. You should take care of Eric's family. Just call me if anything happens," he emphasized. Reluctantly, I agreed to move in with Eric's parents, but just a few weeks after the move, I began to regret my decision. The people I thought were kind and welcoming began to show their true colors. Eric and his parents started treating me like a servant, leaving all the household chores, cooking, laundry, and cleaning solely to me while they did nothing. When I asked Eric for help, he brushed me off. "I'm tired from work too. Housework is a wife's job, right?" he retorted. My protests that I also worked fell on deaf ears. "It's different. You married me, so you should be devoted to me and my parents," he would say dismissively. Coming home exhausted from work, only to face an endless list of chores, was overwhelming. But it wasn't just the chores. Eric's mother, Mary, made my life a living hell. She would deliberately spill food to dirty the floor or complain about the smallest speck of dust. "This spot is dirty, clean it," she would order, leaving dirty clothes everywhere for me to pick up. After I had washed and carefully folded them, she'd say, "These folds will crease the clothes, do it again," and then kick them apart. Mary often made cruel remarks about my upbringing, sneering, "You can't even do housework properly because you weren't raised in a proper family. How pitiful. It's amazing you can't hold a job. The company must be blind to hire someone like you. It's your dad's fault for the way he brought you up." I was against marrying someone from such a family, but Eric insisted. I deeply disapprove. "You should be more devoted to us and Eric. If we hadn't welcomed you as a wife, you'd be living a sad, lonely life with your dad." Hearing such insults about my dad made my blood boil, but I had to suppress the urge to lash out at Mary. The worst part was Dad John, my father-in-law, and Eric did nothing to intervene. Instead of supporting me, John would look at me with disdain. And Eric would even join Mary in mocking me. "Mom's right, you lack any gratitude toward us," he would say, echoing her sentiments. "Why is she so cold to you?" Eric sneered. "A woman from a dysfunctional family like yours would have been left on the shelf if I hadn't married you. You hardly have any qualities beyond working and doing housework, so at least do those well. Don't even think about asking to share the chores. That's your role as a wife. Making excuses like being tired from work is completely unacceptable. I won't tolerate it," Eric dictated. Whenever I tried to argue or refuse, Eric's mood would shift dramatically, treating me as if I didn't exist. "How dare you, as a wife, make a fool of me," he would shout. Mary, his mother, would chime in. "Don't stress Eric out when he's tired, only making things worse for me." Some of the furniture in my in-laws' house had been bought with my money, and not by choice. They had abruptly taken me to an electronics store, pressuring me to buy things. I capitulated under the public pressure, not wanting to cause a scene. But the harassment didn't stop there. When I tried to visit my family for Christmas, they obstructed me at every turn. "You're our wife now. Focus on our preparations. We have a feast to prepare and thorough cleaning to do. Your dads all alone won't be doing much, right? We have other relatives to entertain." They insisted. When I persisted in wanting to go home, they responded childishly, spilling juice on my packed clothes and hiding my shoes. Facing daily complaints and harassment, I reluctantly gave up the idea of going back home. Unable to reveal the truth, I told Dad, "The in-laws' house is busy with Christmas preparations, so I'll stay and help. I'm sorry I can't make it back." Dad didn't blame me. "It can be helped," he said gracefully. "Don't worry about it, it's busier there with more people. I can't manage fine alone here," he comforted me. Eric's ongoing tyranny made me seriously consider divorce, but I was troubled about how to break the news to Dad, who was always so understanding and kind. Determined to celebrate my father's 60th birthday without causing him any pain, I secretly made a reservation at a renowned fancy restaurant. Knowing Eric and his parents might object, I simply told them I needed to return home briefly. They grumbled but accepted my excuse when I promised it would be just for the day. Dad was overjoyed when he learned about the restaurant reservation. "I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful daughter. Thank you so much," he said, and hearing his gratitude filled me with immense happiness. However, I never anticipated what would happen next. As we arrived at the restaurant and informed the staff about our reservation, we were met with a shocking revelation. There was already a reservation for 2 under my name, but 3 people were already seated. Confused, I went to check the reserved table and was stunned to find Eric and his parents sitting there. Eric looked up with a smug smile and sneered. "Too bad you can't outsmart us and dine fancy just by yourselves." The in-laws didn't even acknowledge us, engrossed in the feast they had presumably ordered for themselves. Dad, seeing Eric and the in-laws at the table, looked back and forth between us, clearly puzzled. He had only ever seen the pleasant side of Eric and his parents, so his confusion was understandable. Eric, suspecting something was up due to my cheerful demeanor about returning home, had secretly snooped through my phone. He discovered the reservation and preemptively ordered dishes for himself and his family to undermine our plans. With a triumphant expression, Eric began to mock us, "People from poor, single-parent households like you don't belong in fancy restaurants. Know your place and be grateful we're allowing you this much. You should go to some cheap pub instead," he said loudly, drawing annoyed glances from other customers. Oblivious to the discomfort he was causing, he remained smugly self-satisfied. Dad, seated next to me, was dumbfounded by Eric's audacity. I was at my wit's end. I knew Eric and his family were selfish, but I never imagined they would stoop to such shameless levels. My anger reached its peak, threatening to ruin this special 60th celebration. Suppressing my urge to shout, I calmly addressed Eric as he sat there smirking. "This is my brother's restaurant," I said firmly. "He invited us here to celebrate Dad's birthday." At my words, Eric and the in-laws, who had been disinterestedly eating, "Frumsy, my brother," who had been listening to the conversation from the back of the restaurant, appeared with a deeply displeased expression. Although he had been taken by Mom during the divorce, unlike our estranged mother, he has always maintained and cherished his relationship with Dad and me. My brother owns the restaurant and had suggested celebrating Dad's 60th birthday here. He hadn't attended the wedding due to work commitments, but he had seen the photos and recognized Eric. Initially, he thought Eric and the in-laws at the reserved table were there to join the celebration with Dad. But seeing Eric mocking both me and Dad, and the in-laws not correcting him, my brother was furious. "How dare you speak to my sister and Dad like that?" he said, his anger palpable. "I regret allowing you to be a part of this celebration. Just because you're Emily's family, is this how you always treat her?" my brother demanded, his anger evident. "I prepared this celebration for my sister's wish to honor Dad, not for people who hijack it to frillo a meal. We'll celebrate Dad and my sister's occasion on another day. You'll be paying for what you ate," he declared firmly. Eric and his party began making excuses. "No, that's not it. We were really meant to celebrate," they protested, but my brother left them to the staff and came outside to join Dad and me. "I'm sorry for letting such people into the restaurant and ruining the celebration," he apologized as we headed home. I explained to Dad all the mistreatment from Eric and his family. After listening quietly, Dad said, "If you're unhappy in your marriage, there's no point in staying. Don't worry about me. Come back home." So, instead of returning to the in-laws' house, I went straight to my own home. Shortly after, my brother called to inform me that Eric and his family had caused a scene over the bill but had reluctantly paid when threatened with police involvement. Minutes later, Eric called, furious. "Where are you? You've embarrassed us. Send the money we paid," he yelled. "I will pay a penny of it," I retorted. "I'm done with you, and we will be divorcing. I've gathered evidence of the bullying, so be prepared." I had been collecting evidence of the harassment from Eric and his family, which they never suspected. According to a lawyer I consulted, the forced purchases and other financial exploitations were enough to prove psychological abuse. Realizing I was serious about the divorce, Eric panicked. "No one but me would marry a woman from a single-parent household. Do you want to upset Dad?" he threatened. I scoffed. "Dad said my happiness matters most. I'd rather be with him than deal with the likes of you." Eric warned, "You regret this. Think it over." But I hung up and proceeded with the divorce preparations. Eventually, Eric and I divorced. He was reluctant due to concerns about societal image but eventually gave in. As the court date approached, I had gathered substantial evidence of psychological abuse, which ensured I received a fair settlement in the divorce. During the property distribution, I took steps to protect my assets and secure my future. I reclaimed the furniture I had purchased for the in-laws' house, exercising my legal right as the buyer. The in-laws tried to complain, but my lawyer simply pointed out that a purchaser naturally retains the right of possession, leaving them defeated. A few months after moving back to my parents' home, Eric reached out, seeking reconciliation. He explained that on the day of the incident at the restaurant, his boss and colleagues had been there for a work celebration. They overheard everything he said to me and Dad. His boss, who had grown up in a single-parent household, was deeply disappointed in Eric's disparaging remarks. As a result, Eric's promising career was jeopardized. He lost his standing and any chance of advancement, and his colleagues regarded him with contempt as a psychological abuser. Eric's troubles didn't end at work. The in-laws' household had become chaotic. Before the divorce, Eric and the in-laws had offloaded all household chores onto me. After the divorce, they were now bickering over who should do the chores, with Eric being pressured to buy new furniture to replace what I had taken and contribute more financially. Eric pleaded, "I was wrong. Elizabeth, I took advantage of your kindness too much. I've truly reflected and want to start over." But my feelings had cooled significantly. It seemed likely that Eric was facing increased pressure to manage household chores at the in-laws' place and was trying to offload some of their financial demands onto me. I firmly rejected his proposal. No way. I wouldn't get back with you even if you paid me. I can't see you changing back and exploiting me again once we're married. I was foolish not to divorce you sooner. Maybe Dad's 60th wouldn't have been ruined. We're divorced now. If you contact me again, I'll consult my lawyer, I said, then hung up the phone. The mention of a lawyer seemed to resonate, as I received no further attempts at reconciliation from Eric. And now, I'm happily living at home with Dad, and my brother occasionally visits, bringing gifts. His wife is pregnant, and he seems truly happy. Dad and I are both excited about the baby, while I'm not considering marriage anytime soon. If the opportunity arises, I'll be sure to choose more wisely.